Did you know salt can cure lung cancer? I mean, there is a science paper about it. Sodium chloride potentiates digoxin-induced anti-tumor activity in small cell lung cancer. Today, I want to talk to you about scientific papers. What are they? Who are they for? And how to read them. You know, if you're a seasoned scientist, stick around. You'll get my opinion on the topic. If you're not a scientist, listen up. I frequently stumble on non-scientific, just journal or media articles that make sensationalist claims. And when I dig into the paper, the claims are solid. Just because you treated some cells in a petri dish with salt doesn't mean salt can cure cancer. I'll leave a link to this paper down in the description. Take a look for yourself. Really cool paper. They use salt in conjunction with other powerful anti-tumor drugs to slow down tumor growth. So, hello, my name is Greg Friedman. If this is your first time on the channel, welcome. Here we talk about various scientific topics, mostly focused on plasmas, because that is my area of expertise. But today we'll just talk about science papers in general. What are they? Who are they for? How to read them? How I read them after 25 years of doing this. And I'll touch up here and there on why you should not blindly trust what you read in the media or claims that are made on X and on Facebook. Look at the source. So I think many people view scientific papers not wrong, but they give them wrong credit. Scientific papers are small pieces of a very large puzzle. It is not a full recipe for the cake. It is a study of how cake particles behave at different concentrations of sugar and different temperatures or something. I guess that's a bad example, but usually a science paper moves the needle a little bit. It's a small step towards understanding. The salt cancer treatment paper I mentioned is very important. I actually originally found it when I was trying to figure out effects of charges dissolved in liquid, including charged electrons. I was trying to understand how charges could affect cells in general and programmed cell death, apoptosis behavior in cancer cells specifically. I stumbled on this paper and I thought it was funny. Salt cures cancer. What matters in the paper? How do scientists evaluate the claims? And how do we separate signal from noise? So why some people read papers in the wrong way, or what is wrong way? Scientific paper is not a tutorial. It is a report. The narrative structure of a paper is a bit misleading. It starts with an abstract that summarizes the whole thing, and many frequently don't go beyond the abstract, where that's not the important part. The important part is actually the data. So the important part is buried deep in the paper. And even the authors kind of sensationalize. They make a sensation out of their overall conclusion, where the most important part are the minute details of the research data that they have obtained. And critical thinking is required to analyze their data. And you often should not rely on their conclusions. You should rather make your own based on their data. And papers are written by humans who are trying to discover new phenomena, they can and frequently are wrong. And it is our job as scientists to doubt healthy skepticism. So when you're looking at a paper, first start with the question. What is the problem? What is the problem that the authors are trying to solve? Why does it matter? What domain is it in? Are the research questions they're asking well defined? Are the hypotheses that they're putting forth testable? And are they testable using the methods that the authors are suggesting? So start with trying to understand what is the question here. At first, I suggest, if you're especially beginning in science or you're a regular human trying to do your research, I suggest ignore the abstract. Abstract is a very short summary provided by the authors, and it can be biased. They're trying to quickly highlight the best of the best in their paper, according to them. Conclusions, too, may be a little bit oversimplified. The paper is a collection of data, and that's the most important part, so I suggest ignoring the abstract at first. At first, just go straight to the figures. Look at the pretty pictures. Look at the data. Data lives in those figures. Carefully look at the graphs. Analyze all the images. Look at the axes. Do they make sense? What is the data telling you? Look at the experimental comparisons that the authors are suggesting. Does it make sense? What does it tell you? What does the data show? You add more salt, cancer begins to die. Well, yeah, if I eat a pound of salt, like, look, the cells in the petri dish are really, really tiny. So you take a 1 microgram cell and you give it 1 microgram of salt. Well, I'm almost 200 pounds. So if you give me 200 pounds of salt, I'm not going to do real well, am I? So what is the data showing? Look at the methods. So the papers frequently are introduction, materials and methods, results, discussion, conclusion. Look at the materials and methods. Carefully consider the experimental design. Would you do it this way? Does the experimental design make sense with the conclusions that the authors are drawing from that? What is their sample size? What are their controls? Do they have positive control and negative control? What measurement techniques are they employing? Do you trust those techniques? Can you find other references in the literature using those techniques to obtain that kind of data or that kind of analysis? And can this be reproduced? If you're an expert, read the method and think, could you do this? If you had the same equipment and the same setup, could you reproduce this? Is it even possible? Next, look at the results. Evaluate them and analyze whether you think the results are supportive of the claims that the authors are making. Do they employ proper statistical methods? Do they even mention statistics? What are they trying to understand? Look, if you're looking at a biological process, statistics are very, very important. When you're looking at a physical process like gravity, if you push a ball off the table and the ball falls, well, there's gravity test. How many times do you really need to repeat that? Versus if you're giving drug to an organism, well, many things depend on many things. So that in order to make conclusions, how many times do the authors think it needs to be repeated? Do they explain why they chose that number of times? In animal research, we are required to provide full statistical analysis and statistical support before we even start anything. Are alternative explanations possible? Maybe the authors were running their experiments, but they were doing it outdoors in Hawaii, and the sun exposure was very high. Maybe authors did not account for something that you think they should have. Is the magnitude of the effect meaningful? Is it statistically significant, and is it meaningful? The authors show something doubled. Is that important? You should also question their interpretation. My favorite, correlation versus causation. Are these two observations correlated? Does one cause the other one? Do you understand the claims of the mechanism, or is it purely speculation? So other authors, do you trust their claims in support of their observation? And don't forget, frequently the research, at least in the United States, a lot of the research is done by graduate students. They're still learning, and they could just get overexcited. Like, you get this result in the lab, oh my God, let's publish it. Salt can cure cancer. You may be overreacting a little bit. So check for that. Make your own conclusions based on the data and the methods that were used. And by the way, what were the assumptions? Right? The authors probably assumed something to be true before they started running their tests. If the paper is well written, they will list those assumptions. Do you agree with them? And of course, you need to think about the limitations of the study. No paper, to the best of my knowledge, I've never seen a paper that covers the topic entirely. So what are the limitations of the study? What didn't they test? What were the experimental constraints of their work? What are the boundary conditions? In other words, what are the limitations of this study, and where should you go next in your search for the answer? And if you're truly curious, you need to compare to the work of others. Does the literature, are there other papers that make similar claims and agree with both the methods and the data in the paper you're looking at? Are the results reproducible? Have they been reproduced? Are there papers referencing the one you're reading? Or is it was just published yesterday? Well, if it was just published yesterday, what papers is it referencing? Whose shoulders is it standing on? Scientific consensus emerges over time. So when you're trying to study a subject, before you make a claim that salt cures cancer, you need to look at multiple studies on the effects of sodium chloride on, the whole organism. What happens at those concentrations? Maybe cancer cells are dying, but at those concentrations, would regular cells survive? Have others confirmed that? And look, when you're reading scientific papers, you need to put a scientist's hat on. You need to think like a scientist. Immediately start with quite a bit of healthy skepticism. Does this make sense? Are the error bars overlapping? Focus on the evidence that the data provides and read the author's suggestions, conclusions, claims with a bit of healthy skepticism. Be curious. Don't just assume, okay, you read the title. Aha, I know what the paper is about. You need to dig a little bit deeper. This is a science paper. If I read an article in the New York Times that started with, economy is down by 20%. I don't really need to read the rest of the article. I kind of know it's going to talk about economy being down by 20% or up by 20%, and there's going to be a bunch of data, hopefully in support of the claim that the title makes. Science papers are a bit different. Data is far more important than the title, so curiosity is important on your part. And remember, science is a process. It's not this paper that you're holding in your hands is not the first and not the last word on that subject. It is a process, and it's a process that hopefully evolves towards an answer. So, in closing thoughts about science papers are tools, they're not answers. Critical reading is a skill you need to develop. It's a very important skill. That bit of healthy skepticism, especially like if you're a grad student. Oh my God, this paper came out of Nobel laureate's lab. Another grad student just like you in that big professor's lab, yes, but it's a student just like you. And she wrote the paper, Healthy Skepticism, but Skepticism. And remember, your goal is understanding, not memorizing. You need to understand the data. You need to think about the conclusions the authors are making, see if you agree, and continue on with your studies. There's a reason you picked up that paper, wasn't there? And if you're a journalist, please go beyond just an abstract. I know, views is all that matters. I get it, but still, you shouldn't get people's hopes up. If you read a paper like this that studies effect of sodium chloride in conjunction with powerful anti-tumor drugs on lung cancer cell lines, don't go and publish an article with the title "Salt Cures Lung Cancer," please. Anyway, so what scientific topics should we explore next? I'm happy to answer your questions. Please post them down in the comment section, and I would love to have more chats with you in the future. Peace. See you in the next one.